Alright, good afternoon everybody. Dan Scott here. I'm answering week 6's question from Stephen Ishak. And Stephen asks, why did the U.S. decide to watch ISIS massacre and rape Yazidi Iraqis on August 3rd, 2015, while we had an advanced intelligence of ISIS's wish to attack the Nineveh Plains area outside of Mosil? I think it's a good question. It's a very pointed one as well, which I appreciate. I'm going to try to answer it in a twofold kind of way. First, from a political science perspective, and secondly, from a more of a realpolitik perspective. So for the first part, I'm pulling from a quote on page 295, where Bellamy says, "A general right of humanitarian intervention would open the door to abuse." From that, I think a case could theoretically be made that the actions taken by the Bush administration in the Iraq War were a good example of an instance where humanitarian intervention was abused, and thus the Obama administration was attempting to avoid the mistakes of its predecessor. But at the same time, it doesn't excuse the Obama administration from the responsibility to protect is laid out by Kofi Annan, and that was on page 298 if you want to look it up. From a more realpolitik perspective, you got to consider that the location and the timing with which this question originally would have come from. ISIS controls the territory in Iraq and Syria that it holds now, and during the rise of ISIS, the Iraqi government was wavering on the verge of total collapse. Shia militias that were backed by Iran were pretty ineffective, and at the same time the Iraqi army was being completely decimated. The only force that really had an ability to stand against them were the Kurdish Peshmerga forces, and even then they were only armed with Soviet-era equipment, and ISIS had state-of-the-art modern American weapons. On the Syrian side of things, the civil war over there had pretty much deteriorated into a proxy war between the American-backed rebels and the Russian-backed Assad regime. And so in that sense, it was going to complicate matters a lot to get more involved than we already were. But I think the real question is still, why have we not done everything we can to destroy ISIS? If you go online and do a quick Google search about the atrocities that ISIS has committed, you'll find pictures and videos of beheadings, crucifixions of Christians and others, mass rapes and rape warehouses, such as those mentioned in the New York Times piece entitled "ISIS Enshrines Theology of Rape." But to correct the original question, I would also mention that it wasn't just the Yazidis that were being raped. It was also the Christians, according to the ACLJ, which I'll post a link to in the description. And there's also, of course, the American missionary and aid worker Caleb Mueller, as pointed out by NBC and BBC. Again, I'll post some links in the description. I think because of that, at the very least, the Obama administration has been negligent of its duties to protect its citizens. And of course, as in the case of Caleb Mueller there. But the case could also rationally be made that this government, as well as other national governments around the world, have actually been complicit in the atrocities of the Islamic State by failing to intervene when faced with undeniable proof of atrocities such as the Christian and Yazidi genocides, mass rapes, the beheading of Muslims who don't comply with the form of Sharia that the Islamic State holds to, and of course the reports of gays being thrown from 7-story rooftops. And the reason I say that, I know it's controversial, but I will base it on a well-known quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer that he once said before attempting to assassinate Adolf Hitler, which is that silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless, and not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. So I hope that answers your question. Kind of a roundabout way of going about it, but that's the best I could do. Hope that helps it for you, and I will see you guys around. Bye.